Dean is an extension educator in sustainable agriculture for MSU Extension. He's involved in cover crops, soil health, and organic agriculture research and education. He is the Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education SARE coordinator for the state of Michigan. Thanks, Dean.
Thanks, Sue. Morning, everybody. How you doing? Ready to move around a little bit? So hopefully we can bring home some of the stuff that Dave's been talking about here with this demonstration. I like this demonstration a lot. You can put up a lot of PowerPoint slides and people can kind of go, oh yeah, yeah, they can watch a video, but there's a lot of not invented here. And the thing I like about this demonstration is we cut these soils from somewhere close. So I'm taking away that excuse. I'm sorry, but my farm's different. It's not going to work on my farm. This is soil that is from a relatively close location. So what we do, and this is the bad part about this whole thing. I love running it. I hate setting it up. We actually go in to a field, lay this thing down, cut all around it, dig out around it, use a sod cutter and go underneath it, and then we pull these types of samples out of the ground, put the trays on top of them, flip the trays over. Now, I don't know if you remember about 3 weeks ago when we had that really hot stretch. I cut about 20 samples during that hot stretch, and that was not fun, but it's a great demonstration, and it's well worth it. Couple caveats here. We don't always know how this thing is going to turn out. We know how we would like it to turn out based on the samples that we cut. There is sample cutting error, operator error, all those types of things. It may not turn out the way we think it should, and I'm going to kind of see what you guys think how it should turn out. And if it doesn't, we'll have to kind of figure out why. We'll do a little bit of problem solving. Second thing is we put on about roughly 2 inches of rain in a relatively short period of time. Now I got to tell you, when we first got this about 7-8 years ago, we used to do it and people would go, we never have a rain like that. Well, in the last 3 years, we've never got that comment from anybody because we do get those kind of events. So this is even more pertinent today as far as how your soils react to particularly extreme rainfall events. So what we have here as far as our soils, this is tilled. It was actually recently tilled. It was from some organic land. And so this is tilled. This one is soybeans planted green. So this is what Dave was talking about there at the end. Cereal rye was grown. Soybeans were planted green into it. Cereal rye was killed and it was rolled down. This is only about a couple years of no-till. This is not a long-term no-till plot. This is not far off from being conventionally tilled to going to no-till with the planting green for soybeans. This is long-term no-till. This has been in no-till for about 20 years. Had cover crops on it. The cover crops were sun hemp and annual ryegrass, and that was cut off of here last week for forage. I like to call this one don't pave paradise and put up a parking lot. So this is an impervious surface. This is Mother Nature's best. This is what we call fence row. So I tell all you folks, if you really want to figure out what the potential of your soil in your area is, because soils vary all over the place. Some are sandy, some are loamy, so, all across the board, different proportions. If you want to know what's the best your soil could be, go find an undisturbed fence row or edge of a wood lot or something like that. put a shovel in there, dig it up and take a look at it. Dig up a chunk of your field, set the two side by side. Gives you an idea of where you could be. If you're wondering where you could go with your soil organic matter, send in a sample of this to find out the soil organic matter. That's probably the best you can ever get to. And you'll probably, in your lifetime, never get close to that. But at least it gives you some idea how far off you are from the best soil you could have in your area. So this is your reference. This is your control. If you want to start looking at your soils and saying, what could I do? Where could I go? Compare it to this fence row type soil. So here's quiz time. Which one's going to run off the most? The parking lot, yep. I've actually had people who miss that part and they go, oh, the tilled soil. It's like, no, you missed the parking lot. It's a good, you guys are on top of it, yep. This should run off the most. Which one would you expect to run off next? Next most. Probably the tilled. Hopefully that's where we'll be. What about between these two? The which one? Long-term no-till? That would be my guess too, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna learn from this too. I'm kind of curious how much this all this residue and all that helps as far as runoff. So we're all gonna learn from this, and then probably this one's probably gonna run off the least, right? Okay, so let's see if we're anywhere close to right. Takes a little while for things to kind of get going here. Let me check my pressures. Yeah, we're good. Yes, particularly one of the bigger rain events that we see nowadays. So this is, we're going to put on 1.5 inches probably in 5-10 minutes. So it's a pretty big rain event. So you can start seeing the runoff already. So what's the first thing you notice from the tilled soil? Look at all the sediment that's coming with it. Yep, it's dark brown. I think we get a little splash over into the parking lot, which is why we get some brown into that. You can kind of notice, so what's the speed of a raindrop roughly? 20 some miles an hour, something in that ballpark. You can see, the reason I put those coins on there was because I wanted to protect that part of the soil. And you can see how that's starting to plateau. So what's actually happening here is the raindrops pound the top of the soil and they move the smaller particles into the cracks, and this is actually creating a thin crust on top of this soil, and it's actually compressing the soil, which you can see as those coins are starting to raise up because those coins are protecting that part of the soil. So you're actually turning your tilled soil into that parking lot. You're making a hard, thin crust, and once you get that hard, thin crust, the water has nowhere to go. It's either going to run off if you have some slope, or it's going to pond in place. And even with that, it's probably not going to infiltrate because of that crust. It's just going to evaporate. Now, what I tell people is, you need to think of your soil as a container for water. And particularly today with the type of rain events we have, if you don't have room, if you don't have a place for that water to go, you're going to lose it. So you want to think about what can you do to increase the size of your container that's in your soil. You do that through soil organic matter, which holds 6 to 7 times the amount of water that other soil components have. So if you can build your soil organic matter, that's going to help you. No-till will keep structure, aggregation. You want those root passages, you want those wormholes. All those wormholes in Dave's radish field there with all those worms, you know, that's a spot for water to go. It might not look like a very big spot, but when you have a lot of them, it will take a lot of water. So anything you can do to be able to hold more water, that's something you can take advantage of multiple times throughout the year, because you'll hold more water from the first event, crop reduces the water in that profile, and you still have more room to put water in at the next event. So that's not just a one-time deal, that's something you take advantage of throughout the year. So you can kind of see, we may be kind of neck and neck here on these two. Got maybe a little bit more runoff on the roller crimped and the short-term no-till, but as far as the amount of runoff coming from those, they're pretty close. So the way to think about this is, since this is impervious, this is how much we rained. And we rained about dead on 2 inches of rain. Look at compare those two. Compare the tilled to the impervious surface. They're virtually identical in amount of water that ran off. In addition, you got a bunch of soil particles with that. You got erosion coming from that as well. Look at how these coins are propped up. That's how much that was pounded down as well as eroded away for the tilled soil. I think these two are pretty close. I wasn't sure if one was going to win out. This one may have a little less runoff, but it definitely shows. Now this is kind of interesting. Those are about as good as the natural area. One of the things you find with these natural areas, they can tend to be so fluffy and have so much loose material that you can get some of that material. Plus, I think there's a little operator error here. I don't know if you can see how high this sample is cut. I think I cut this one a little high, which probably contributed to getting more runoff than we probably would have gotten if I'd done a better job of cutting it. So we can contribute that one to operator error. So we don't want you guys to get ahead of yourselves. So we put this shield in place, which I'm going to try to get out of here without hurting the bottles. So we have another set of containers behind, and these trays have holes in the bottom. So the back containers collect the water that runs through the soil profile. So the other way to think about it is, if you add these two containers together, the difference between this center one is what's held in the soil profile. So it might be a little hard to visualize, but so if we look at the back containers, we've got nothing in the back container on the tilled. We got practically all of it in the front. We had a little leakage on the parking lot, but you know, virtually the same. Not a whole lot of difference between the parking lot and the tilled surface. This one's kind of interesting. We got not a lot of runoff, and quite a bit that runs through. Now this is a good thing. What that tells you is there's a lot of passages in there, and water can actually move deeper into the soil profile. Remember I said, how do you increase your container size? Part of the way you do that is that the top layer is porous enough to send water deeper into the soil profile, which gives you more storage capacity. This actually did better, and I don't really have a, this is the first time I've ever done a planted green roller crimped rye sample. So there must be probably that the rye roots have died and they've created a lot of passages for that water to go deeper into the soil. This had living cover crops on it up until a week ago, so it probably does not have as many of the actual open passages or decayed passages. Would be what I would suspect is that this is not as porous as that. Yep. Yeah, yep. And that was not killed with a roller crimper. That was planted green, killed with glyphosate, and then rolled down. So yeah, so I got to tell you a story about the coins. We do this for all of our demonstrations, so I was doing one down in Branch County. Got done with the demonstration, and I'm talking to a bunch of farmers, and I turn around, and I look, and all the coins are gone. Someone taking the coins. Now, I can say this because I'm 100% Dutch. I'm absolutely certain that the person who took the coins was not a Dutchman. And the reason is they left the penny. So I'm sure it was not a Dutchman. But that is a true story that happened a couple of years ago down in Branch County. So if I can get someone to hold my microphone for me. What we're going to do is we're going to take this tilled one and we're going to flip it over just to prove to you that that water did not make it to the bottom of that sample. You know what, come up and take a look at the bottom of that sample. The bottom of that is absolutely dry. And you can see on the edge here, that's how deep the water actually, it's like only an eighth or maybe eighth of an inch, quarter of an inch. You pounded that down.
Sealed it off.
And sealed it off. And so that's what's happening in your tilled fields. And if you think about it, if that water gets away from you, there's no way to get it back unless you irrigate.
Right.
So if you're used to farming with 31 inches of precipitation in a year, you lose 5 of it in a couple of events, you're now farming with 26 inches of precipitation. You're putting yourself at a deficit. So, are you going to need it every year? Probably not. I'm a firm believer that in, and I'll air quote it, a normal year where we get water the way we like to get it and we get heat units the way we like to get them. Are cover crops going to show you a big difference in that year? Probably not. Over the long haul with a bunch of years, probably, but year to year, are you going to see a big difference with cover crops? No. But in the years where we're at the extremes, which we tend to be a lot more these days, cover crops are going to help you when there's too much water, probably going to help you when it's dry, give you some protection from evaporation, those types of things. And so, you know, I believe we should be looking at cover crops kind of like crop insurance. I'm pretty sure most of you don't use your get paid by your crop insurance every year. You buy that crop insurance and that year you need it, it pays off. Same thing's true with cover crops. You get that extremely wet year, nobody else can get in the field and plant their crops, and because you had cover crops, you can get in and get your crops in a couple weeks, a week or two ahead of everybody else. That's an advantage. And so the years you need it, it's going to pay off. And so I know there's some years you're going to go, man, I don't think I saw anything from those cover crops. Well, you probably didn't. But make sure you give them credit for the years where they really do deliver something to your system. Last thing I'll say is I believe cover crops have been blamed for things that they didn't do, and they've also been credited for things they didn't do. So be honest about your cover crops. It's such an easy scapegoat. You know, you got a crappy looking field out there, you put cover crops in, well, it's gotta be the damn cereal rye that did it, you know, and you're gonna kind of ignore the fact that you might not have quite got the slot closed as good as you could have, that your planting depths weren't real good, you know, and so it's too easy because you can kind of think that if it's the cover crop's fault, then it must not be your fault. Be honest with yourself and make sure that there isn't something else you're doing that's actually creating that. Don't blame the cover crop for something that it's not responsible for. I know it's an easy scapegoat, but I think you got to be honest on some of that stuff and give it a chance. So, any questions?
Now you said this soil came from an organic farm.
No, so this soil came from the Kellogg Biological Station.
Okay.
And we have all different types of systems over there. And so this one came out of some organic land that we had because we just happened to, that's something we have to till.
Okay.
A lot of the rest of it is no-till, and that was a convenient place to get a tilled sample.
Yep. It produces the same results.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing sacred about being organic.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that it was tilled. It was a convenient place to get tilled soil. I hope you're still hearing me. Any other questions? Yes?
So that looks like it's kind of a sandy soil. Would this be
It's kind of a sandy loam. Yeah.
Would this be even worse with clay soil, do you think? Because it would all just like sit on top and run off. I guess
It would probably crust. Yeah, I would guess it would crust pretty bad. The finer the texture, the more little particles you have to fill in those cracks and crevices. So it probably would not be quite as bad on a coarse textured soil like a really sandy soil because the particles are big. It will still do it, but it might not do it to the same extent as a sandy loam or a clay. Yeah. Yes?
Have you tested stuff or like this on if you cover crop something and then tilled into the soil or anything? Like
Yes. Well, I got a similar situation. So I was out in Tama, Iowa, running this, and the farm I was on, they actually had a field that had been in alfalfa for 6 years, and they had only tilled half of it. So that's as far as they gotten, and they really wanted me to run the two samples of the tilled alfalfa compared to the untilled alfalfa, and then compared to some other soil that was just tilled all the time. And they were thinking that the tilled alfalfa would have a benefit. The fact that it had been in alfalfa for 6 years and then tilled, it would still perform better than something that was tilled year after year after year. I hate to tell you, you could line them right up side by side, they were the same. The act of tilling destroys it in one one operation. There's just that's the thing I tell people is, you know, you got to get away from tillage, because I understand how cathartic it is to till soil. It's great to get on that tractor, fire it up. You got that brown dirt behind you. It smells good. It looks good. It makes you feel good. But it makes your soil feel terrible. Now, the last time I checked, if you're doing something for your benefit at the detriment of someone else, that makes you a bully. So quit bullying your soil. Ask yourself, don't get the equipment out. Before you get the equipment out, go out in the field with a shovel and take a look at it and say, do I have a really good reason to till this field? And I'm not against tillage. Sometimes you need it. Field gets tore up due to conditions in the fall during harvest. You got ruts and things. You're going to have to do something with that. You might have a bad resistant weed problem. You may need to take them out. But what I want people to think about is you don't have to do that year after year after year. Do it once, take care of it, take your lumps on the fact that you're going to destroy your soil structure that year to fix another problem, but you have a reason to do that. And then start on no-till, and hopefully you won't have to do that again. But if you do, then you do. But, you know, go out, till with forethought, go out, take a look at your soil. Don't just jump on the tractor. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there who, it's like an alarm clock, you know, in the spring, bing, time to go till. You know, it's not like they even go look at it. They're on the tractor in the field going before they even looked around at the field to decide if it needed something. You know, we need to be a little more cautious with that type of thing, and just stop bullying your soil. Got any other questions? Oh, yes.
Do you have any insight into why the thatch and the cover crops can suppress weeds, but your chosen crop will still push through?
I think a lot of it is because I guess I probably stand back a little bit. I think a lot of it is because the weed seedlings can't actually get started because it's not ideal conditions for them to germinate, where we've actually placed the crop seed in a position where it can germinate and get a good start. You know, if you think about it, weed seeds are kind of on the surface, just below the surface, and they're opportunistic, so they're kind of waiting for conditions to be right. And I think they tend to be somewhat wimpy early. So anything that covers them up, you know, and a lot of it's shade. A little bit of it's things like allelopathy and stuff like that with cereal rye, but probably not a big component. It's probably more just, you know, it's dark. Where I think the crop seeds have, you know, they've been placed in a position to grow well, and so they're pretty sturdy by the time they get to the surface and work their way through. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.